And one of the reasons I'm tearing this apart, I used this for field target shooting last year, and here we are almost to November, and so I like to tear it down every year and go through it, clean everything, and make sure my adjustments are all good so that it remains dependable. So that's what we're going to do here today. I've already taken the stock off, and then we use the degassing tool to degas. Take the air out here. If you ever want to do that, you can actually caulk it and shoot it out, or use the degassing tool here. You get to a point, and you need to get a some sort of a rod, or you hear that? That's actually air coming out of the end of the gun. So what I've done essentially is open the valve up. Okay, all the gas is out. The thing I like to do next is pull off the barrel band. If you don't pull it off, sometimes taking the shroud off and the barrel, you can scratch it with this. So I just pull it right off at the beginning. And as far as the shroud, it's just a matter of unscrewing the end cap here. It comes out like that. There should be an O-ring, which there is. And then some baffle. We'll finish getting those out in a minute. The shroud itself, we twist off. And what it's doing is it's unscrewing here out of the receiver around the barrel. We have the shroud off. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 baffles in there, an O-ring, and the end cap. And this, you might be able to tell, if you look in there, you can see it's silver colored, and that's because it's been drilled out. Early on, there was a lot of problem with these with clipping, and the pellet goes through the baffle. It was clipping the edges or the edges of your end cap. And so I drilled them out slightly larger on all of these, and I haven't had a problem. This end piece, you can tap it off with a block of wood or something, and there's really no need to take it off, but you could if you wanted to. The other end here has also a O-ring, and this, between this one and this one, they keep the shroud so that the barrel's centered within the shroud. There's a little set screw on this one. You can see it can slide back and forth. There's a flat here grooved into the barrel. And that, you can see it right here, so that that set screw sits somewhere within this flat. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and pull the receiver off, take the bolt out as well. And in this case, I have a single shot tray in there still. Take that out. And we'll start with this, taking out the little tension screw back here in the back. And all that is a little detent ball. You can see that. And that fits up, well, I'll show you here in just a second. So the next thing we're going to do is pull the bolt lug out, which is right here. You can see that. And basically what happens is that when you cycle the bolt and pull it back, it catches another one on the hammer and pulls it back and caulks it. When you close the bolt, it goes back to this position. So we've got to get that out. And that comes with the bolt lug, the screw itself, and also a little spacer here, like so. And that's how you catch the, get the right spacing so you can catch the one in the hammer. And at that point, the bolts just come right out. And the detent ball I mentioned, and the bolt, there's a little dimple here on the top of the bolt that detent ball sits in and keeps it in place, keeps it from flopping around. Holds it right in there, in that position when it's closed. Okay, then we've got 2 screws on the top that we have to take out. And we have to be careful because this screw and this screw are holding the barrel in. This one and this one. The 2 on the sides are the ones we take out to get the receiver off. They're long ones like that. Okay, then the last screw we need to take out is down here underneath the bowl. You can see there's a screw there that screws down into the cap on the behind the hammer on the main tube. Okay, we have to take that one out because it sits underneath the bolt. If you don't pull the bolt, you can't get to it from this side, and it holds the cap here with the hammer in the bottom tube there. Sometimes you have to put a little pressure on it. Okay, and then the receiver just lifts off. There's the screw. This is the transfer port that goes between the valve here and up into the barrel. So it sits between these 2 pieces, kind of like that. And on each end of it, there's a rubber gasket, a seal. One that goes in the barrel end, and one that goes in the valve end, right there. Okay, so that's the transfer port. If you wanted to, like I say, you could take these 2 screws out at this point and pull the barrel out. I'm not going to do that, but you could. Okay, then as far as the trigger group, we have 3 screws, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. And this one in the back has got this hammer spring pushing back against this end cap. So we have to be aware that it doesn't take off on us. I'm not going to get into the trigger group at this point, but I may do that later. So there's our end cap, There's our hammer spring. And to get the hammer out, there's another screw in there. This is the one that the bolt lug catches and pulls the hammer back and forth. And it's just a little short one like that. And the hammer comes right out. There it is. All right, the next thing we have here is to get the tube cleaned out. We have, the two ends. This is the fill end, and normally what you do to get this out, once the pressure's out of here, is put the barrel band back on. And once the barrel band's back on, you can usually unscrew it. Like so. So we'll be replacing this O-ring here. This has a regulator in it. And so the instructions when I got this regulator said to include a wire. Let me see if we can get that picture of that. And so I put a wire on it. Let's see here. There it is. So that I could get at it and pull that regulator out at some point in the future. So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so I'm going to reach in there and grab that wire. You can see it's sticking out the end there. And hopefully that's enough to where I can get a hold of that and pull it out. Yeah, there we go. And this is the regulator that I have. We'll go ahead and replace these two O-rings while we have this apart, but it's been pretty reliable. I don't think I'll do anything else to it. Okay, and now the valve itself sits here. We're going to take it out this end. And I forgot to mention, but normally when you get these from Crossman or from the factory, they'll come in, and this will be inside here, and that's where your gauge goes. Okay, so we got to take out 3 bolts for the valve. One here on the bottom. Again, these are just little short guys. One on the either side. So at this point you could pull it out the back, which would be just a few inches. But you've got so many cutouts and sharp edges on both the top and the bottom. And most people tend to push them out through the front. And so that's what I'm going to do, is push it out through the front. To do that, I've got a dowel here. And then just put that in there. And push it out the front, right there. And once we have it to this point, it's a simple matter to take apart. There's a slot in here. If you have a wide enough screwdriver or can make a tool to take it out, you can do it pretty easily. And then here's your valve. You can see the valve stem. This is the valve seat here. There's a seat here, and this is the valve seal, seats against it. You can see it comes out this end. The spring, the valve exhaust return spring, like so. So you've got that springiness there. And then this, at this end, that holds everything in place. And that's all there is to the valve. And we'll replace this O-ring here too as part of this process, and then get it back in the tube. Now while we have this apart, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the valve metering screw. And basically there's two screws in here that they're made out of brass, so they're kind of fragile. Here's the one this one goes in as a set screw, and the other one is the metering screw. Okay, here's our valve, and the transfer port sits right here, and that's the hole in the transfer port. You can see it. What we're going to try and do, we've taken the set screw out from the valve metering screw adjustment. I'm going to try and see if I can get some idea what's going on, because the air goes through the valve, through the transfer port, and what this screw does essentially is throttle that. So if you screw it in, you see there's a blockage coming through the transfer port there. And so there's very little air can get from the valve through to the transfer port and out to the barrel. On the other hand, if you withdraw that, you can see that hole there opening up just a little bit. I'm going to do that one more time here. So right now it's wide open, or it can be fully closed. What we normally do is take it all the way in and then back it off, say 5 turns, and that'll make sure that, because you can't see all this when you're in there working on it, that'll make sure you're at one end or the other. So there's all the way in. There's 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, 4 turns, and 5 turns, and now it's completely unblocked. So that's how that adjustment works, is it throttles the flow of air from the valve into the transfer port and up through the barrel. Okay, now while we're on the subject of adjustments, we just talked about the valve metering screw in the valve itself affecting the flow of air through the transfer port. So that's one adjustment. Another is the hammer throw, and this is the hammer itself. And you can see the old, well, basically you're going to take an 1/8 inch hex head wrench, and you're going to adjust this, how far it sticks out. Pull in just a little. So what you're going to do is, as you screw it in, you can tell that this goes further out, like so. Now when you're setting these up, what you'll do is you'll put this all the way in, and what it'll do at some point is it'll touch the valve, and you won't be able to tighten it anymore because of the pressure in there. What this controls is It's what we call the stroke. I think Crossman calls it the, what do they call it? The hammer spring striker adjustment or something. Basically, it's a stroke. And so we have our valve together here, like so, and the hammer's like this. And you can see there's not much travel here between the hammer. I mean, it can only go that far to where it hits, but we can adjust this with our, through the back of the gun. And you can see that the stroke is going to be longer and longer and longer the further we pull it back, until right there, that's the maximum stroke that we'll get because it's fully retracted. And now if we have it like that, you have quite a bit of stroke now, the distance between here and here, so it's able to gather momentum and hit that harder, knocking it off its seat. A couple of things. The old hammers had a set screw here. So once you got your adjustment, you could pull your hammer out and then set it with a grub screw here. And that would basically lock it into place so it wouldn't move. So you're pretty good confidence that this is not going to shift on you while you're shooting because of this grub screw. Some of the newer ones don't have that. They have a hole, but they don't have a grub screw in there. So you might want to consider Loctiting or something like that to hold your striker, your hammer stroke adjustment in place. Okay, so in addition to the hammer throw adjustment here, and I mentioned the set screw that holds it in place, it controls how far the hammer travels before it hits the valve stem. We also have an adjustment on the hammer spring pretension here, so that we can make this spring have more pretension before we cock it, or more relaxed and less pretension. The way that one works is through the back of the cap here with an 1/8 or a 1/4 inch wrench, and you can see that this is turning, and as we screw it, it gets further out in that direction until it ultimately would come out like that, and that's what the spring goes on to. So if it's fully extended, you're going to have a lot of pressure on the hammer. On the other hand, if it's fully retracted, you're not going to have hardly any pressure at all. And this one, we normally pull it back as far as we can to get our starting point. So let's say it came from the factory here. So the first thing I do is I start and I count how many turns to back it out all the way. So that'd be 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, 4 turns, 5 turns, 6 turns, and right about 6 turns. So and I would write that down somewhere, you know, that the factory setting was 6 turns from full counterclockwise. And you don't have to have it apart from the gun. You can do all this in the gun, but then I would put it back. So I know where it's at. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and that's my initial setting, so it's repeatable. It's the same thing with the hammer stroke. Assuming it started, say, out here somewhere, right there, for instance. The way that you remember where that is count it from there, where it started. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 5.5 turns counterclockwise from the original factory setting. So we can always put it back to that factory setting by going 5.5 back in. There's a half, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. Then we lock it down and we're back where we started. It's important to know where you're at as you make adjustments here. I forgot to mention earlier that I wanted to say, we've talked about having 3 basic adjustments here. The hammer spring tension here, the hammer throw with this screw here, or stroke, and the valve metering screw in here to block or open up the valve to the transfer port. But the other adjustment that we don't talk about too much usually is fill pressure. And that can have a big effect on how the gun shoots, how many shots you get, what your curve looks like, and that type of thing. So there's really 4 adjustments we can make here to this. Some guys too, if they want to get a lot of shots, they'll take some weight off of the hammer, and they can also shim up the valve return spring here. And you could even cut coils off of the hammer spring if you wanted to, if you didn't have enough adjustment back, and you get a ton of shots. But all of those types of adjustments are going to rob you of power, and most of us like to keep as much power as we can. All right, I hope this video has been helpful. Hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.